Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Camping is supposed to be relaxing, but sometimes it turns into something else entirely. Tonight, we'll be sharing a few true horror stories from the wilderness. But before we begin, a quick reminder to give us a like, and if you've got a story of your own, we're always open to hearing it. This happened in the summer of 2021. I was 24 at the time and had just finished grad school. So when my friend Tyler suggested a short hiking trip, I said yes without much thought. He'd done this trail once during college and said it was quiet, not too far from the Tennessee-North Carolina border. We planned for 3 days, 2 nights. Just the 3 of us, me, Tyler, and James. We arrived early and started walking, but we didn't see anyone else all morning. Then, around noon, we stopped at a ridge to rest. That's when we saw him. An older man came up from a side trail. He looked like he was in his mid to late 50s. He wore a green jacket, dark pants, and boots. No backpack, just a wooden stick in one hand and a small metal canteen on his belt. He walked past without stopping, gave a short nod, and said nothing. We watched him disappear into the trees ahead. As he moved, we heard a low humming, a slow, steady tune under his breath. It stopped when he was out of sight. At the time, we were at least 6 miles in. There were no roads nearby, no cabins or shelters marked on the map. And people don't usually hike that deep without gear. But we told ourselves maybe he was an experienced hiker. Or maybe he'd set up camp somewhere nearby. We kept moving and reached our campsite before evening. We set up the tent, boiled some food, and sat by the fire. No one mentioned the man again, but we were all thinking about him. Nothing unusual happened that night. By mid-morning, we reached the ranger outpost. It was a small wooden building near a lake. No one was inside. The door was open and there were water pumps beside it. Tyler filled our bottles while James checked the maps posted on the wall. There were papers pinned to a bulletin board. And at the bottom corner, I saw a flyer. A black and white photo of a man. It was the same man we had seen the day before. His name was Thomas Gray. Missing since November of the previous year. Last seen near Pine Hollow, but still not found. James came in and stood still for a few seconds. Then Tyler joined us. No one said anything for a while. Then James broke the silence. He said maybe we had mistaken the man from yesterday for someone else. That night, we camped in a lower area surrounded by thick trees. There was barely enough space to set the tent. We didn't light a fire, and the ground was too damp anyway. That night, I lay awake again. And suddenly, I heard it. A slow, steady humming. Faint, just outside the tent. The same tune as before. I didn't move. The sound circled slowly, then stopped behind us. Then, for a long time, there was nothing. No footsteps. No footsteps. No wind. No birds. Just silence. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. In the morning, I asked the others about the humming sound. They said they heard it too, but they didn't check outside because they were scared. We didn't talk much after that. We just packed up and got back on the trail. We walked faster than usual. We stayed close together and didn't stop to check the map or rest. It was late morning when we saw the old metal post that marked the last 5 miles of the trail. After that, the path began to slope downward, and the trees started to thin. It should have felt like a relief, but it didn't. About an hour later, we heard something up ahead. It wasn't loud, but it was close. A voice, calm and steady, called my name, then Tyler's, then James's, one after the other. It was the same voice we'd heard 2 days earlier on the ridge. We stopped walking. None of us said anything. We stood still for a few seconds, then kept moving. Now, the final part of the trail felt longer than it should have. But eventually, we passed the same signpost we'd seen on day 1. The gravel parking area came into view, and our car was right where we left it. We reached it and dropped our packs. Tyler started the engine. As we pulled out and drove down the gravel road, I looked out the window one last time. A shiver ran down my spine. I thought I saw a shadow, standing at the end of the trail. I turned to tell the others, but when I glanced back, it was gone. We didn't talk much after the trip. Everyone went back to normal life, or at least tried to. But a few weeks later, Tyler told me something had changed with James. He stopped showing up for things. Stopped replying to messages. Tyler visited him once. Said James looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. He said he kept hearing something at night. Someone calling his name from outside his apartment door. He never opened the door, but it kept happening. This happened a few years ago, When I was between jobs and had too much free time, I started feeling stuck. I thought a solo camping trip might help clear my head, but I didn't want to go to a crowded campground. I wanted something remote, quiet. Then, one weekend, I found a small used bookstore a few blocks from my apartment. It mostly had old novels and travel books. I ended up buying a secondhand camping guide, one of those thick ones that cover every state forest and trail. When I got home and started flipping through it, a piece of paper slipped out. I opened it. It was a printed camping permit. The location, Eagle Hollow State Forest. The issue date was from 2009. There was a name typed near the top and a stamp at the bottom that read, "Access granted." I checked online, and to my surprise, it was real, but not much information came up. No current campsite booking links, just a few old trail reviews and one blurry map from 2011. I figured maybe it was just one of those old forest zones that never became popular. I wasn't thinking too much about the rules. I just wanted a few days in the woods. So I printed out the permit again and planned to go that weekend. It took nearly 6 hours to drive there. The last 40 minutes were all trees and dirt roads. At the entrance, there was a wooden board. No recent notices. Just a faded sign that said Eagle Hollow State Forest. I kept driving until I found a narrow pull-off near the trailhead. I parked there, grabbed my gear, and followed the GPS coordinates on foot. After about 20 minutes of walking, I reached the marked spot. There was a small metal post stuck in the ground, with a number on it. It was the same number from the permit. The area was flat and open enough for a tent, but I didn't see any signs of recent campers. Still, I shrugged it off, set up my tent, boiled some water for noodles, and sat quietly until dark. There were no bugs, no birds either. It felt strangely quiet, but I told myself that was normal for a forest this deep. Until that same night when I woke up around 3 a.m. At first, I didn't hear anything, just a weird feeling like something wasn't right. Then I heard slow steps, circling my tent. One step, then another, soft, deliberate. They stopped after a while. I tried to tell myself it was an animal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I woke up late the next morning. I stayed in the tent for a bit thinking about the footsteps. Was it real? Or had I imagined it? Eventually, I got up and stepped outside. Everything looked normal at first, but as I walked around, I started noticing small things. Things that didn't feel right. Like the top flap of my pack, it was unclipped. I always clip it closed. Always. It wasn't a big thing, but it was something I'd never leave open on purpose. Then I saw the small bag of trail mix. I had left it inside the tent near the entrance. Now it was sitting just outside the tent, on the ground, still sealed, not chewed or ripped. So, not an animal. But I didn't leave it there. And then I realized my flashlight was gone. I always keep it in the left side pocket of the tent. I checked the bag again, nothing. So I looked all around. I searched the entire area, even under the tent floor and inside my boots. Nothing. It was just gone. It felt like someone had gone through my stuff during the night. But nothing was stolen. It was like someone had just looked at everything and then put it all back. Almost exactly how it had been. I tried to stay calm, but I had a sick feeling in my stomach. I didn't know if someone was messing with me, or if it was all just in my head. I kept thinking about the footsteps from the night before. Maybe I should have packed up and left, but it was a long drive back. So I told myself I'd stay one more night and leave first thing in the morning. That afternoon, I didn't wander far. I stayed close to the site, didn't take any hikes. I just sat near the tent, ate a little, and tried to keep my mind busy. Before it got dark, I zipped up everything carefully. I put the flashlight, backup battery, and phone inside the sleeping bag with me. Then, around midnight, I heard something again. Not footsteps this time. Just a light tap on the side of the tent. Once. And then, nothing. I didn't move. When I heard the tap, I just stayed frozen in the sleeping bag. There were no footsteps. No whispering. Just complete silence after that sound. I didn't want to make a noise. I stayed like that for what felt like hours. Then, eventually, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, it was just getting light outside. The first thing I did was check my gear. The food box was still closed. My backpack was still zipped. But the flashlight, the one that had gone missing the night before, was back. It was sitting just inside the tent entrance, placed neatly on top of my boots. That was enough for me. I started packing. Immediately, I stuffed everything into my bag and rolled up the tent without even folding it properly. I just wanted to leave. As I walked back toward the car, I kept glancing behind me, every few steps, just to make sure no one was there. When I reached the car, it was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The permit, the one I had folded and kept in the glove compartment, was now sitting on the driver's seat. I hadn't touched it since arriving. I didn't even think about it after that first day. I threw my bag in the back, got in, and drove out. A week later, I tried looking up Eagle Hollow again, but this time, I found something I hadn't seen before. It was a scanned PDF from an old state database. A short notice about campgrounds closed in 2010. After unresolved incidents and a lack of available personnel, the notice listed several areas. Eagle Hollow was one of them. I also came across a forum post from 2012. A user had asked if anyone knew why the forest had been shut down. One reply just said, "Too many missing persons." They stopped investigating after 2009. That was the same year stamped on the permit I'd found in the book. I still don't know who or what walked around my tent, or who went through my gear, but I do know I wasn't alone. And whoever it was, they didn't want me there. I didn't recognize the name at first, but I noticed he was connected to my uncle on Facebook, so I assumed he might be a neighbor. Someone from the building, maybe. His profile showed he was close to my age and nothing looked suspicious at first glance. So I accepted the friend request, thinking it was probably someone I just never noticed around. I didn't think much of it afterward, but a few days later he started messaging me. In the first few messages, he mentioned that he lived in the same building and knew my uncle well. He talked casually, said how friendly my uncle was. He even mentioned seeing me a few times around the building. I wasn't sure if I'd ever seen him before, but I still responded out of basic politeness. I didn't want to seem rude, especially since my uncle had a good reputation in the building. Even though I replied, I kept my responses brief and formal. Still, by that point, I had a suspicion. It felt like my uncle might be trying to arrange some kind of connection between me and this guy. I wasn't in a relationship and my uncle often asked personal questions about it, as if it was something he needed to monitor or manage. So honestly, it didn't really surprise me. I had no interest in anything more. But I stayed polite as long as the guy didn't cross any lines. Since we lived in the same building, I just wanted to keep things respectful. Avoid any problems. But what really started to bother me was something that happened later. One day, my uncle came to my apartment and asked for help with something on his Facebook account. He didn't know much about technology, and since we lived in the same building, I agreed to help. I often helped my uncle with things like that. So, I logged into his Facebook account without thinking much of it. As soon as the page loaded, a chat window popped up in the corner. The message was from the same guy who had sent me the friend request. It stood out because it was the only message in the entire conversation, as if the rest of the chat had been deleted on purpose. The message didn't make much sense on its own. It looked like it was part of an earlier conversation, possibly continuing from something that had been said before. Now, I can't recall the exact words, but the main idea was clear. He needed my uncle's help with something. The message ended with a laughing emoji. It was casual, familiar, like they had been joking about something. But it also strongly suggested that my uncle had been talking to him about me, maybe even encouraging him to reach out. Up until that moment, I had tried to give my uncle the benefit of the doubt. But now, it felt clear that he was involved. It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It felt planned. So, I started replying to his messages less often. I had no interest in starting any kind of relationship. I was only being polite. I never gave him any reason to think I felt the same way. After some time, his messages became less frequent. I assumed he'd lost interest. I didn't think much about it again and just went on with my normal routine. Until one day, after finishing my work from home, I decided to go out and buy some groceries. But as soon as I opened my apartment door, a pack of chocolates fell to the floor. The chocolates had been carefully placed on the doorknob. At first, there was no immediate suspicion directed toward anyone specific. I just picked up the chocolates and set them aside in the room. But it wasn't the last gift. A few days later, another item appeared outside my door. A small potted plant. Unlike the first gift, this one included a message. A note was glued to the flower pot, followed by a smiling face emoji. For a young woman in her 20s, living alone, receiving anonymous gifts, with a message that referred to being watched, created a strong sense of fear and unease. The fact that there was no name, no clear explanation, it only added to the dread. The fact that there was no sign of who had done it made everything even more disturbing. I began to feel uneasy in my own home. I started looking around more carefully every time I opened my door. Not long after that, I received a message from the same neighbor who had contacted me before, the one I had already distanced myself from. The timing of his message, arriving so soon after the gift, made everything feel connected. And by then, the situation had crossed every line. Leaving anonymous gifts and writing messages like, "I like you," was not normal or respectful behavior. It felt threatening, but I was too afraid to confront him directly. I had no idea how he would respond. While I'm 5 feet 9 inches, which is tall for a woman, he was about 6 feet 1 inch and noticeably muscular. His size alone made me feel uneasy, even though we'd barely spoken in person. The idea of approaching him to say anything felt risky. Plus, he knew exactly where I lived. So I decided not to address it right away. Instead, I waited to see if he would give himself away in his messages. I started listening closely to footsteps near my door, trying to figure out if he was coming by again. But nothing happened. I wasn't sure if it had stopped, but I started to feel slightly better. Then one day I went to check my mailbox. Inside, I found a bunch of small notes and poems. The poems were unusual. Each one had 4 lines and sounded romantic. I couldn't tell if he had written them himself, but each poem talked about love in a different way. The strangest part? Every note had a date written on it. Then I noticed there was one note for every day of that month. That meant someone had been watching me every single day. He had been leaving them regularly, one by one. Then I remembered something. The day I found the chocolates was the same date as one of the notes. I hadn't checked my mailbox that day, so I didn't see the note until later. That made me realize he had been doing this for a while, without me even knowing. At that point, I had reached